Now we'll come into the core of the talk, and this is a paper led by Alison Aslam, Shruti Ranganatham, which is here, which is a great researcher in our team, also participated. She's in the 5th medical year, I think all is in the title: uncertain benefits, guaranteed harms. I will go into the data and try to explain why I think there's a lot of uncertainty about many things. It's really, critical appraisal of data. It's not medical advice, and we will be talking about that, I think, in questions. Is it a hot topic? I think that's the first thing to ask, and that's a reason I was so interested in this topic. Breast cancer is the most frequently diagnosed cancer worldwide. 75% of cases are hormone positive, HER2 negative. And here this is data, recent data, trying to figure out how many proportion of patients are stage 1, 2, 3, 4, and basically 2 plus 3. Switzerland and the UK are basically the same. It's 45% of cases. So the NATALY trial, which is ribociclib for 3 years, could affect up to 1/3 of newly diagnosed breast cancer, which is, again, the most frequently diagnosed cancer worldwide. So I think that's really why this topic is so interesting, fascinating, and potentially impacting many patients. Hot topic, yes. Trial designs. Basically, I think the most important thing here, we have 2 trials, Monarchy, and Monarchy excluded N0 patient. In NATALY, as you can see, T4 N0 are included, T3 N0 are included, T2 N0 according to genomic risk, but basically it's broader. It's really broader than Monarchy. If we go into more details, the Monarchy trial, as you can see here, you should have positive lymph node and some characteristic of aggressivity. And you were randomized between abemaciclib for 2 years with standard of care endocrine therapy, no restriction here. It's important. It's a very important difference with a NATALY trial. And so the primary objective was invasive disease-free survival according to the STEEP criteria. In NATALY, it was ribociclib, 3 weeks on, 1 week off, primary endpoint EDFS, but the control arm was only letrozole or anastrozole, and in men or premenopausal women, they had to receive goserelin. This is, I think, a very important point. Why is it so? It's because of issue with QT prolongation in association with tamoxifen. So that's why this trial was designed like that. And now 3 years of treatment. Another difference is the dose. The dose here is different from the dose given in the metastatic setting, which is 600 milligrams. Primary endpoint is the same, invasive disease-free survival. We'll come to that. Any question about that? I'm sure you are very familiar with the design. Efficacy data. This is significant. I will come back to the delta because it's updated very often, I would say. The NATALY trial, and this is a bit to have some relax with a Vinay point. If you can fit a laser pointer between the curves, you can give the plenary session. And here, to be honest, I put the laser point, but was not so easy. But I don't want to argue. I mean, hazard ratio 0.75, and it's really significant. There is no argumentation about that. So here, it's key data from both trials summarized, and I think here it's important the absolute gain. So that's why I said it's changing, because you have all these conferences. For instance, I will just exemplify that. So this is the data from the New England paper. So Monarchy, it's 7.6% difference at 5 years. In NATALY, it was 3.3% at 3 years in the New England Journal paper. Then you have ESMO Oh no, sorry. This is this is the last publication from February. So the 3-year. So it's a final analysis of EDFS. Now it's less, than 3.3. So the number need to treat is increased. But we have in ESMO 2024. So 3 months before, we have the 4-year results, and now it's more. It's 4.9. So the number need to treat is 20. To be honest, it's difficult to follow all this data. I don't know how you do in breast oncology. You are going to ESMO, San Antonio, and all that. Sometimes I feel it's a bit too much. Okay, back to this.
Context for the non-breast cancer.
Sorry?
Just for context for the non. So presumably, still no overall survival difference.
Oh yeah. Sorry. Yeah, sorry. I had to say it. So yeah, it's obvious, but yeah. No overall survival. So it's not yet mature, but no overall survival benefit.
At those stages.
Yeah. So that's why the efficacy data is mainly that. So back to this sentence. I know an expert, a key opinion leader, and he told me he has very good results with adjuvant CDK4/6 inhibitors. Somebody want to comment? Do you think you can say that in the adjuvant setting in general? Okay, I don't want you to put you on the spot.
I don't think it is particularly, and I don't think that we quantify toxicity, actual toxicity, well enough for looking at outcome. Because I think we look at outcome as survival, but actually, particularly in early breast cancer, people don't just want to be alive, they want to be well and alive.
Yeah. So I get your point. Your point is about the clinical relevance of the EDFS event, but this sentence is to me a bit surprising. It's not about the trial. It's about in my practice I have good results, and this I find it a bit. That's why I say it's a talking point because.
The question I would ask is, does that expert have a practice for 1,000 patients?
Yeah. I mean,
If they don't, then they can't.
it's impossible to know if your patient, even if they recur or not, if they benefited. It's impossible to know. And that's the point I really want to make here, because basically this is really the last update, the 3-year update of Natalie trial. So it was just published in February. Again, they have published the final analysis of the 3-year EDFS event. But you know that 87.6% of patients had no event regardless of therapy. 9.3% had the event regardless of therapy, and 3.1% avoided an EDFS event with the therapy. So how can you know if your patient benefited or no, even if there is an event? If there is no event, you cannot say it's thanks to the treatment. You cannot say it. That's why I find this sentence a bit strange. So back to your point, the relevance of the endpoint EDFS. I think a very important point to make. It's a composite endpoint. So as you can see, the event can be death, can be local regional invasive recurrence, can be distant recurrence, can be many things. And on the curve, there is no distinction. You don't have steps that are wider if you have a death. I mean, all is the same. All is counting as events. And this is very well reported. EDFS definition is all these events can count as an event. And this is very well reported in both trials. This is just an example in the PFS endpoint. PFS is the equivalent of GFS in the advanced or metastatic setting, and is a very nice work from Anushka Valia and also with Vinay Prasad. And they showed that in many trials, the breakdown of the results is not available. You don't know which part of survival and which part of progression is in the trial. Here we have the breakdown, and what I found very interesting is that the survival part is not so huge. It all depends on your interpretation, but it's less than 10%. It's 9% in Monarchy, 7% in Natalie. So this means that the proportion of deaths among these events are 9 and 7%. And I think it's really important to understand that and to explain that to the patient, because when you say disease-free survival, there is a word survival, and I think this word really matters for patient. I think we should be clear in the way we explain the endpoints. I know it's not possible with all patients, but I think it's really important to avoid this term to be misinterpreted. Toxicity, here, those familiar with the medicine, diarrhea is often a concern. I won't go into all the toxicity, but you have a toxicity with these agents. To me, what is more concerning is the death. So again, it's treatment emergent adverse events. It's not treatment related, but most regulatory agencies are looking at treatment emergent adverse event, because we know that to put the relation between the treatment and the adverse event is not always reliable. And here, 2 of the 15 deaths were assessed by the investigators as possibly related to the study treatment. In the control arm, no deaths were considered related. So we have 2 potential toxic deaths, which is to me concerning in the adjuvant setting with no overall survival benefit yet. For Nathalie, we have other type of toxicity. You have less issue with diarrhea. You have some issues with liver enzymes and other neutropenia and other side effects. I will also go to this point, the point of on-treatment death, and this also was a worry, and this is from the last update, but you have 20 patients that had on-treatment deaths against 9 in the hormonotherapy alone group, and a lot of COVID-19 related deaths, 6 versus 1. And this is unexplained. In the paper, they say there were no myelosuppression, or I think it was worded like that. And to me, it's also, a red flag. Why you have this imbalance in on-treatment deaths? Definition of on-treatment deaths is up to 30 days after it's on treatment, or up to 30 days after the discontinuation of the treatment. Now, informative censoring. That was the first part was aimed for. This is the analysis done by Tom Meyerson and colleagues with Jan Tannock as the last author. They used other methods than I have been using for the Nathalie trial, but basically they took all the excess censored patient in the abemaciclib group and turned their censoring status into events using some methods. They made a paper, very famous paper, Lancet Oncology, and their statement was pretty strong. Adjuvant abemaciclib should not be prescribed to women with high-risk estrogen receptor-positive breast cancer. I know this paper was highly commented. What we did is, in the Nathalie trial, we again used digitized curves, and this allowed to do this analysis. So it's very conservative. In the experimental arm, in the first 6 months, we took 10% of patients, assuming there could be some toxicity-driven censoring. Those patients are taking a pill. In the other arm, they are not taking a pill. And again, maybe I should have told, but both trials are open label. Both are open label. In the other arm, you may have some patients being disappointing to be here. Maybe they want to seek for abemaciclib because Nathalie was after monarchy. And maybe I think one potential concern was patient being on tamoxifen and then enrolling in the treatment, being assigned in the control arm. So they have to take now anastrozole or letrozole plus goserelin, but they were before on tamoxifen. So maybe this was some disappointment censoring. So it's very conservative. You take only 10% of the censored patient over the first 6 months. You modify their events of censoring with toxicity into an event, and the disappointment type of when you check disappointment, you modify the time of censoring. Instead of being early, it will be late censoring. And without, you get, again, the benefit is no longer significant. So this is really about the fragility, the reliability of the gain reported. When you have this number of censored patients and you make small assumption and it's an open label trial, it is really about the reliability. Yeah, please.
How do you know that those, what you say, conservative estimates of the 10 and the 10 are...
How I...
The company have that data.
So how I choose 10, for instance? Yeah. So what I try to do is to do the most conservative assumption to try to see if this modifies the results. When I choose 10, or if with 5, it's not modifying this, I really try to see if I have to modify, all the censoring data of my patient, I think it's implausible. But if I do very small assumptions and it's modifying the statistical output, then I really start to be worried. This is about the reliability and the fragility in the sense of the data.
But then how do you know, can you then confirm that hypothesis by knowing?
So ideally, data sharing would be ideal with the reasons, also the reasons for censoring. It's very rarely reported. You can ask for them, writing a New England Journal letter, but I don't know if you tried to write New England Journal letter. My record is not so good. So they say they have no space, but it's online, but okay. So yeah, no, the reason for censoring, but I'll come back to data sharing later. To straighten the point of informative censoring in those two trials, I think we have also, the Penelope trial, which was a placebo-controlled trial and had no imbalance in early dropout. We have another trial, the Palace trial, with less imbalance, and both were negative. So some say, okay, it was not as long. Some say, they are not as well. These are not the same drugs. So there's a lot of debate. But I think it's reinforcing this. And overall, this is from our paper, we maintain that the gain reported in both trials are potentially compromised by informative censoring. Again, it's an hypothesis. We don't know. But this, to me, it really flags the fragility of the results. To finish about CDK4/6 inhibitors, I think there is this point to make about sample size inflation. You have a lot of patients, and this was a work by Kay and colleagues that show, the sample size is really growing over time in oncology trials, and sometimes you have this statistical significance which is not clinically relevant. The classical example was erlotinib bevacizumab in pancreatic cancer. It was a couple of days difference, but it was statistically significant, and it was highly criticized for that. And the open label design, this is really surprising. We had a lot of products tested in the adjuvant setting, and most, we'll come back to that also, but most are not tested against, are really tested against a placebo. And I don't understand what is the justification. I think both companies would have the money to afford a placebo and to make this trial, and I think it's really introducing this potential for informative censoring and also a risk of bias in quality of life assessment. Just a last point about Nathalie. I think Nathalie, the fact that there were no concurrent tamoxifen use, I think there were a risk of overtreatment of some patients because they were, and we know that 30% of them were on anti-estrogen. I would assume it was tamoxifen mostly. And then they were randomized, and if they were in the control arm, they had this anastrozole or letrozole plus glycerin. And I think there were a risk of treatment, and maybe some of them quit the trial. This was maybe part of the disappointment censoring, if some disappointment censoring happened. So my point about adjuvant CDK4/6 inhibitors in breast cancer, informative censoring, I think it's likely, because all the reasons I explained. Even assuming those estimates are reliable, I think we have to remember these are composite endpoints and to bear in mind the number need to treat, and I think it's really shared decision-making, informed decision, as you said, Dr. Abraham. Huge sample size, clinical significance, toxicity pattern. To me, the on-treatment death is a pretty concerning fact. I cannot really explain. I don't want to be, we don't have statistical difference in overall survival, but these deaths are a bit concerning to me. 2 or 3 years of treatment and financial toxicity, we'll talk about that a bit later. Waiting for OS, to be honest, I would be waiting for data sharing and real sensitivity analysis to really know if those results are really tangible. Data sharing. So I asked the Natalie trialist, I asked the company if they could share the data. This is an ongoing process, let's see, but I want to share with you this data sharing statement that appeared in the New England, which is pretty damning because, as you see, yes, they will share the data, but you don't have nothing else in this report. I don't understand why the New England accepted that, but this is really, to me, deceiving, This is not data sharing. So on that positive note, as Vinay often said, we will go to another topic. Any question about CDK4/6 inhibitors? We'll have time for questions after.